an occasion 35 years ago when Terry and I got married, and it's a long story because Terry's
Mazel tov.
Thank you. 36, sorry. Anyway,
Typical.
Terry McGuire, right? She was originally Greek Orthodox, and I remember calling Cape Town, and my grandmother asking me what religion was she, and I said Oma, because they were from Germany. I said she's Orthodox. I said no, hang on a second. Anyway, we went through the whole thing, and in those days, at least with my family and her family, it was kind of, to a certain degree, unheard of. And we found a rabbi in Salem that I think is with, he worked with now Manus Friedman's daughter and all that stuff. And I said to him, I said, hey, listen, you know, there's going to be all these...
Salem, Massachusetts?
No, Salem, Oregon.
Oh, there's a Salem head.
Yeah.
I thought they were the witch hunter.
And, you know, and in those days, I mean, I'm sure you realize that there was a lot of different things, you know, the Greeks and the Jews and all this kind of stuff. And the rabbi started,
Maccabees, you know,
Yeah.
all of it.
the rabbi started out and he said one thing, which has always stuck with me in my whole life. And I think about it every day with all the people that I deal with, both here and around the world. And he said one thing. He said, God did not make religion. And I thought to myself, wow, how profound, how amazing is this? How did it all happen then that these people just kind of went their own different way when God really theoretically had nothing to do with it?
He said God made religion, people didn't.
I don't know. I'm just curious, like, what your perspective, you know, on that is. Like, you know, I know a little bit of history about, you know, Christianity and Muslims and the Jews and, you know, every other kind of sector out there. But what do you think really happened that we couldn't all be as one as we are, or as that we profess to be as human beings on this planet, the way that you talk about how God has created us all to be equal?
Okay. Okay, so I can't speak for that rabbi because I don't know what his intentions were and what he meant. Is he still around?
Well, yes, no, he's still around, yeah.
Okay, so I would definitely suggest you speak to him to explain himself. Again, I don't know what he meant. I'll just give you my take on the
Yeah.
subject. So it's interesting. Adam and Eve, were they Jewish? Doesn't say anywhere they were Jewish. They were human beings created by God. Officially, Judaism as a religion, as a people, however you would define it as a race, begins 26 generations later at Sinai. At Sinai, the Jewish people actually are considered converts. They all had to convert. Right. So clearly, everything prior to that means that all human beings were essentially the nations of the world, is what we call it. And when you say Goyim, people think it's Goyim simply means nations. And then they formally became a people at Sinai. Now here's I don't want to, this requires a lot more elaboration. I'm just going to be brief. So here's the story. When Adam and Eve were created, they were created with a purpose. Talk about a mission. It was Rosh Hashanah, and the purpose was that they would transform this world. You mentioned Tikkun Olam. Transform this world and turn it into a garden. Literally. So the whole world will become like the Garden of Eden. Turn it into what is sometimes called a home for God in this world. And how would they do that? Through virtue. Instead of giving into their base, selfish desires, to live a life of service and virtue and justice and kindness, and aligned with the purpose for which they were created. You know, think of a machine that's aligned with its engineer's intentions. Okay? However, God gave the human being free choice, and as free choice, you could also choose to follow your own desires. So with eating of the tree of knowledge and the subsequent generations, basically, the human being wandered away. They betrayed themselves and their destiny and their calling. Fast forward, 20 generations pass from Adam, and a man called Abraham, I mentioned Abraham and Sarah, and they come, and Abraham grows up in a idol manufacturer's home in a pagan world, where basically the attitude was dog eats dog, survival of the fittest, and that type of approach, and God was being ignored, and God's laws were being ignored, and everything was about power and control. There was no justice, there was no charity, and Abraham recognized that something's wrong with that. And he single-handedly pioneered, on his own, through his own initiative, what we call monotheism, that we have to answer to some higher authority. And he in turn committed his life and then his family's life to tzedakah mishpat. That's the words. To charity, to kindness. In other words, reversing the trend that was going on for the last 20 generations. And with that, you can say the concept of a Jew was born. It wasn't yet legally, but now you had someone who was embracing it. And he taught it to everyone. He only had non-Jews because there was no Jews. I mean, you don't even call them non-Jews, to be honest. There's no Jews, there's no non-Jews. It's nations of the world. And Abraham taught this message to anyone who would listen. And that became essentially the beginnings of Jewish teachings. Now, in a sense, God responded. Here's a human being that's reaching to me. I, in turn, will reciprocate. And hence you have the concept of revelation and a relationship between God and man, which was Abraham. And then Abraham's children. Now, Abraham's children went to war with each other over these matters. And these children actually would become the ancestors of what would later be the Roman Western Christian world and the Muslim Arab and the Arab Muslim world. Just for the record, Yishmael, Esav. Then fast forward another 7 generations, and now we have the generation of Moses, and now the Jewish people are formally established. Now the truth is God offered the Torah to other nations as well, but they rejected it. They were not interested in the disciplines that the Torah was imposing. So what I would say to you therefore in that context, I would say the following. God wants every human being to follow the blueprint that he gave us for life. It was the Jews that initially were the ones that embraced it and taught it to others. That's the concept of light onto nations. But every nation, we don't, for example, encourage conversion because you can be non-Jewish and serve God perfectly. You can have a share in the world to come. You have a soul and you have a destiny. Now, as far as the distinctions go, part of the beauty of the human race is that we're diverse. Even among Jews, you have Kohanim, priests, you have Levites, you have Israelites, you have scholars, you have business people. So the idea of a Jew and non-Jew in that context is not a discriminatory or a statement of superiority, it's a statement of diversity. For example, you talk about why is intermarriage a problem? And I don't want to go into that in detail. But it's not because of superiority. We also don't marry our brothers and sisters. Not because we discriminate against them. We love them, but it's not marriage material. But there is the concept of legal halacha conversion in Judaism, which goes into a whole other topic. That's the way I would explain the concept. So did God create religion? God created laws. Then the laws can become a system, and they did become a system. So the word religion is just a word. Again, it's semantics. Is it a way of life? We call it a way of life. When Mashiach comes, the future, it says all the nations of the world will unite and serve one God, each in their own way. There'll be a world filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. Does not mean everyone will be Jewish. And Christianity and Islam, if you take away any of their distorted, violent aspects, can serve God the beautiful way. Look, the country of the United States was founded by Christians, not by Jews, but Christians that were tamed and not calling for violence. They accepted the principle that all people are equal, and therefore minorities have equal rights to the majority. That's somewhat, it's a bigger topic.
No, thank you.
And I hope it didn't, I know we have a lot of topics to talk about. Okay.
Thank you.